to share his wisdom and expertise with all of us. And I'm talking about Sathish Kamath, accomplished technology leader with experience of enabling digital transformations at large multinational corporations with a proven ability of balancing simplification, transformation, and innovation strategies to provide a competitive advantage for the enterprise. Currently, Sathish is performing the role of Global Lead Enterprise Architect for Mars Wrigley and Global Services Business Lines of Mars Inc. He is also a member of the Mars Enterprise Architecture team, which was recently recognized as the winner of the 2019 Forrester and InfoWorld EA Awards for its accomplishments. Sathish, you have a wealth of expertise and practical experience in enterprise architecture. It's a real gift and a real honor to have you sharing your expertise with our global audience today.
Thank you, Jose. Great to connect with you again, and welcome everyone. It's my pleasure and honor to be here and part of this conference. So looking forward for this session and sharing my perspective, my experience, and my story at Mars. So welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen, and please let me know when you're able to see it, Jose.
Looks good.
Cool. So let's get started. A little bit about myself. So I'm Sathish Kamath. I'm lead enterprise architect at Mars. I look after a couple of segments within Mars Wrigley, which is the confectionery part of the business, and Global Services, which is the finance, HR, shared services, the indirect procurement, so part of the business as well. So before we get started about enterprise architecture and innovation, I wanted to spend a little bit of time telling you about Mars and who we are, what we do. So it's a large global organization in 125,000 plus associates or employees. It's more than a 100-year-old company. We are in more than 80 countries doing business, lots and lots of sites. And as you can see at the bottom there, a number of billion-dollar brands that our consumers love and adore from several years. So we operate across chocolate, gum. So some of the brands that you see here, like Snickers, Twix, Extra, are from that segment. We operate in pet care across pet food like Pedigree, Royal Canin, Whiskas, etc., and also on the pet services side like Panfeed and BCA that are part of the group. So this is a large business, obviously dealing with multiple business models like CPG, like services in the vet health side, and retail through stores like M&M's Retail that I'm sure many of you would have visited in a large global cities like London, Shanghai, Vegas, etc. So it's a large enterprise, and obviously, being part of the enterprise architecture team is both a challenge and an opportunity, which we really get excited to share today. So let's talk about the session specifically today, right? So the title here is how can enterprise architecture drive agile innovation, and every single keyword of that is important, and most important words from that sentence I'll say again is agile innovation. So what I want to do today is talk about the context of why is it important that we do what we're doing. What is the impact on specifically like the context in the world where we are operating, and how is it different from what we did in the past. The second part of my story would be about the impact that it's having on enterprise architecture discipline as such, right? So this is what are the industry experts saying and what are they advising us to do. So that's a little bit of an outside-in story. And then the third part, which is our story at Mars, of how Mars enterprise architecture team is driving agile innovation and the science behind it. So let's get started and talk about the world we operate in, right? So VUCA is probably the term that you've heard across multiple different places: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So a lot of scenarios that we face today are probably never experienced in the past. Today, a lot of solutions that we build are expected to be adaptable, built to change versus built to last. And every single dynamics is changing, like the consumer or the customer behavior and expectations are changing, experience mindsets are changing, food habits are changing, health habits are changing, and obviously things like pandemic, COVID-19, when it comes in, a lot of different dynamics change. So the situation is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and therefore this requires a different mindset to solve problems. So when you're solving problems for China as a geography, for example, you got to be mindful of dominant technology players like Alibaba, Tencent, WeChat, WeCom platforms there, and operate in that ecosystem, especially. And if you're operating in another geography, you have to be mindful of what works best there. So in summary, it's a VUCA world that we're operating in, and to solve problems for the next generation, we have to adapt our traditional learning technique. So uh, why I'm emphasizing on this aspect here is because traditionally we've solved a number of problems using technology, but it was the same problems that repeated themselves. So if you want to fix your balance sheet, general ledgers, implement a financial ledger system, and it'll take care of itself. If you want to track your orders and disperse those orders, then obviously implement an order management system. So the problems were well defined, iteratively solved over a number of years, and we knew what we were getting into. But that's not the scenario right now. So the scenario we have right now is about, what if the raw materials don't show up on time to my factory? What if the labor shortage happens suddenly and we don't have our experts on the ground? How can we have the same production line in a factory, multitask, and probably produce more than one product what it was designed for? So things like these problems are emerging, and we wouldn't have solved them in the past, not just Mars, but outside across the industry. So this is becoming a challenge, and which requires us to adapt our learning process. And that's where I call this traditional learning process have to be, when traditional learning process when investigating business problems have to be adapted. Now, what is this adaptation that I'm talking about here, right? So let's look at exploitation and exploration. These are the two different techniques. So we have a set of key beliefs, and we build hypotheses. We create insights that support our hypothesis, and we generate data that sort of support that insight. So if I were to maybe buy an iPhone, first of all, I'd probably believe that I need a smartphone and iPhone is the best. I build a hypothesis saying, why is it the best? Why is it better than other competitors? I'll build some insights of having an iPhone over other phones that probably support my hypothesis, and I'll gather data, how many users are buying them, when are they buying them, what is their age group, what's your demographics, etc. But everything is to support the same key belief that I've started on. And this technique is probably what I would call as traditional technique. It's still applicable, it's still important, but this is what most of us have been used to or following in any kind of solution environment, which I call as exploitation. Now, what happens for the VUCA world is we go backwards. We get some data. So the first and foremost skill is observation. Observe what's happening around you, and then gather the data, learn from the data, look at the insights. What are the data telling you? And then pick up the insights and develop your hypothesis, and that hypothesis will then need to adjust your key beliefs. So this is what we mean by an exploration mindset. And what we see in today's day and age is obviously to solve the VUCA world problems, exploitation needs to be complemented with exploration, and both techniques have their home, and we have to find the sweet spot on when to use what. So in a nutshell, key beliefs, hypotheses, insights, and data are all valuable milestones, but how you achieve them and the sequence with which you achieve them kind of is different when you compare to exploitation and exploration. So that's in a nutshell what's happening, what is the context that we are operating on, etc. And let's come back to the impact that this is having, right? So if you look at what are the industry experts saying about enterprise architecture as a discipline, it's still required, it's still relevant, but the focus areas are tremendously changing. And what are they, right? So I've summarized 3 key trends that are impacting enterprise architecture for you. The first one is enterprise architecture leaders are expected to play a key role through the recovery. And I'm talking about the pandemic and the COVID-19 recovery here, but it's not just recovery, right? So there are 3 key phases to this recovery. So first off, when we entered the COVID-19 pandemic, we probably realized what is the core of the business, what are the core technologies that support the business, and we were in the mode of respond and protecting the core. So that was the respond phase of the recovery. And then we were in the recover phase, which is basically looking at where can we optimize, where can we do more with less, where can we improve the cash flow, where can we improve the working capital, where can we reduce inventory. So it was all about recovering, but optimizing the business and trying to find technology solutions to help recover. And then the last phase, which probably most of us are in right now, is about renewing. So renewing our focus, renewing our product set, renewing our strategy, coming up with different business models, and seeing where is that dynamic changing and helping reshape the business. So in summary, enterprise architecture leaders are expected to see across all of these three phases, how can technology add business value or create a business impact in a positive way. The second one that we are looking at is about the shift that we need. So traditionally, architecture organizations have been predominantly playing the role of a technology architecture function. So there is three kind of broad dimensions in architecture. So you have a technology architecture, which is heavy on technology but less on strategy. Then you have a solution architecture discipline, which is sort of in between solution and technology, halfway through, and strategy as well. And then there's enterprise architecture, which sort of is higher on the strategy but less depth on the technology. So right now the expectation is that the enterprise architecture functions shifts from a technology-oriented organization to an internal management consultancy, which means help develop the strategy, help co-create the strategy, help drive value to the business and become that engine that can drive agile delivery to generate business outcomes. It could be an iterative approach to innovation, and it will be a focused approach to solve business problems that are specifically coming up. And this is where I think innovation comes into play, right? So this is a trend that we see that EA has to shift to be relevant in the business environment today. The third one is about information architecture coming to the front again and it being important. So information is the most important asset for the enterprise. It could be information or data, it could be master data, transaction data, data sets that get acquired from outside, market insights. It could be your point of sale data that you get from your partners, etc. It could be a number of different assets. However, the idea here is to look at information or a data-led exploration and exploitation technique, and most importantly, guide and provoke the business to find where are those digital touch points where it can add either artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., to kind of drive autonomous decision making or continuous value through information and data. So data-driven decision making or data-driven organization. So these are the key trends. So the experts are telling us as well that yes, some things are changing, and innovation is definitely some of the things that we need to do as enterprise architecture function. So obviously, market evaluation, yes, the trend is positive, and what happens to the EA organization then? So on this slide, I wanted to talk about the focus for EA, right? So benefits, obviously, yes, we have to drive benefits out of technology for the digital enterprise and create or enable the digital enterprise on its own. But the team has an accountability to balance it with the risks. So this is having a good eye on what are the risks that we have in an enterprise, operational or technology or regulatory or whatever, and balance that with speed and benefits. So that's the role that enterprise architecture have to be playing. That is, take calculated risks, tread with caution, and speed, but not speeding, as we say. So what does this mean for enterprise architecture is, we spoke about redefining the EA function as such to switch from a traditional technology organization to more of a management consultancy organization and help shape the renewing of the enterprise. Also changing the way you lead. So traditionally the organizations have been, I would say, more of an ivory tower functions, developing standards, policies, and expecting everyone else to follow that and understand and use it in their day-to-day job. But today the focus is more of a collaborative team of teams environment, wherein enterprise architects are expected to be part of the wider delivery functions and have a collaborative leadership style rather than a command and control leadership style. The third one is building an EA team that's resilient. So the analogy I'll use here is of a Swiss knife, right? So how can you create a team that can be useful in multiple ways? How can you have enterprise architecture leaders that can be data architects at the same time, finding problem for your analytics versus being an innovative, innovative architect, finding use cases for direct to commerce or or e-commerce or any other areas? How can you drive cloud migration at the same time try and solution something like a digital twin for your smart factory manufacturing? So there are expectations that are changing, and we need to build teams that are equipped with multiple skill sets or specialties, so that we can be more like a Swiss knife and useful for the organization in more than one ways. And the last part is obviously delivering business value. So it's not enough if you deliver the value, it's also important you communicate, right? So create that transparency in the team of what you're doing and communicate that maybe on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis in terms of town halls or newsletters. That can help the organization understand that yes, this team is actually walking the talk and not just trying to do governance and control by their function. So that's about our outside-in approach. Now let's talk about Mars, right? Our story at Mars. How are we driving things within Mars enterprise architecture? So at Mars enterprise architecture, our focus is on three things, and all the three operate in parallel. And so the first one is about simplification, wherein we look at enabling efficiency. The second is about transformation and driving it at speed. 100x is what we call it. And innovation is where the C's value happens. So what happens within the simplification or efficiency track is about application rationalizations, retirements, looking at risks that technology produces to the enterprise, and help drive that risk mitigation or elimination, like cloud migration, getting rid of our technology legacy platforms, maybe mainframes if you have them, if you have Lotus Notes, and trying to eliminate those barriers for your transformation. Because often what happens is these are like time bombs. If you don't attend to them on a timely basis, they'll come and hit you at some point later in your transformation, and you probably pay a lot higher price during that point in time. So this is about remaining fit and healthy, right? So this is how we go to the gym, have a balanced diet. Same principle applies. Looking at our technology portfolio and making sure that they're in a healthy condition. That's what we mean by simplification. Transformation and with speed, it's a good combination to have, because you don't want to transform and by the end of year 15, when your program finishes, the whole world has moved on to somewhere else. So here we look at how can we transform at speed and reuse existing capabilities or products or platforms that we have developed, and make sure that they are adhered to the architecture so that it will be a faster time to market and value realization. So the transformation comes across different areas. Obviously, we have a functional transformation agenda that we support across finance, HR, procurement, and we also have some other transformation, business transformation agenda that we can look at. How do we transform our digital manufacturing capability, or how do we look at our supply planning, demand planning function? How do we transform our consumer or customer focused interactions with our B2B customers or end consumers, as we call it in the CPG, and so on. So a number of different programs happen here, but the focus of the architecture is to look at how can we reuse existing capabilities, how can we repurpose products, how can we build them to scale and build a robust infrastructure, technology, application, solution that can deliver value. The third piece is about innovation, and this is the focus for today, right? So here what we do is look at the lessons learned from the industry, because we have set up regular sessions with our partners. So we invite our partners to present, product partners, service partners, on a quarterly basis to look at what are the trends in our industry, what are other customers doing, how are they driving value, and what are the top 3 or 5 solutions that they see in the market space. We also do this with our peer connect. So we have quarterly meetings with our enterprise architecture peers across other organizations, CPG predominantly, and others as well. But this is more of a fireside chat, exchange of ideas, because at the end of the day, we are all here to solve business problems using technology. But it's always good to know that if you're doing something very different, that's cutting edge, bleeding edge, or bleeding edge, and how are others dealing with the same problem? Because end of the day, you realize that, hey, these problems are not very different. Maybe the way you solve it might vary across organization based on the maturity of the investments or the need in the organization to solve the problem, but it exists. So innovation happens when the readiness meets an opportunity. So we always equip ourselves with this knowledge. So whenever we spot an opportunity across simplification or transformation agenda, we are able to interject and create those touch points for innovation. Now, the right-hand side of the slide is talking about how we drive it, right? So we look at the wheels in our digital engine. That the first wheel is about how do you find the problem. So we use technique called design thinking. So you very user-centric, empathy-driven, putting the user at the heart of the problem, and using this framework which has empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Because often we assume the problems that we are solving are the right problems without having the right validation. And sometimes we don't really push the problem hard enough to look at how might we solve something with boundaryless or predefined bias that doesn't get into the solutioning mode of it. So this is the focus wherein we put in to say, let's identify the right problem in using the right technique and look at ideating and solving this in multiple different ways. The second part of the wheel is about how you solve the problem. We would look at data, AI, and next-gen technologies to look at how we can solve this problem. So obviously data-driven, insight-driven, action-driven organization always kind of gets there faster. But we've also seen that most of the informations or insights so that we find by using these techniques are kind of changing a dimension of how we look at a problem itself. So that's very important. So we use the latest next-gen technologies that's appropriate to solve the problem. Obviously, don't use a hammer for a nail, but something like a lighter that could potentially be useful for that solution. The third one is about automating it. So we use robotics, process automation, and other techniques to make sure that the solution sort of runs by itself, and we go and free up ourselves to find the next problem. So this is about how we operate, but the holistic thinking here is that we run some focus areas within the team, right? So we look at what do we do in enterprise architecture that sort of connects what I've said into the previous slide and action that into innovation. So trying to bring this home from innovation perspective here is this like, one part of the role of enterprise architecture is looking at business transformation roadmap. So we look at how do we drive technology transformation for a business problem and drive that iteratively. Some could be regional programs, and could be global programs, and could be functional-led programs, and could be market-led programs, etc. But we are a large company, so we have multiple programs running across the board, and where we are expected to look at what's the best technology to enable this. Then there is, an architecture governance and a new tech introduction, because here we look at it's not enough if you buy the technology, that's probably half the problem, but the second half of the problem and most important one is you implement it in the right way. So looking at the governance and making sure that the sort of implementation is driven by a standard approach, we mitigate the security gaps that we have, and have a new tech introduction process. So whenever we're bringing a new tech introduction into the Mars landscape, we have some additional checkpoints so that we understand what we are bringing in, what is the capability, what's your roadmap, and also baseline so that any new part of the business needs a similar solution. We could actually tell them, hey, this is something that might be helpful. The third part is, I spoke about application tech rationalization. So this is where we as EA, Enterprise Architecture at Mars, are having a mandate to drive application retirements, rationalization, and we publish these numbers every month as a scoreboard to say what did we do last month, what's our target, and how are we trending, etc. So we make this very public within the company, but the goal here is to become your kind of SWAT team to ensure that we retire redundant applications and we keep ourselves fit. So these are the three things that we do on a daily basis, but then we're constantly evaluating industry trends, technology trends, and looking at bottom-up opportunities to intervene with digital ventures. So digital ventures is what we call as Agile Innovation, and it has a few ingredients, right? So what would you call as a digital venture? Because this is where we do hackathons with our colleagues in the business segments. This is how we do drive innovation agenda inside of Mars, outside with our partners, and so on. But any innovation that is, it has to be a purposeful innovation, which means it has to be solving a very specific business challenge or a problem. it has to have a quick time to market. So probably a 3-month window is ideal to have, but it has to be fast, because else the dimension of the problem would have changed, or the need for the solution would have changed. It can be driven from a test and learn mindset. So we iterate, we test, we learn, we fail fast, or succeed and build the next iteration, and etc. But always we start, when we build this, look at the scale aspect of it. What if this works? How can I go fast with this solution from one geography to another, or one segment to another, or one function to another? So we always look at making sure that the architecture is good enough to scale in future as well. So this is what we helps us understand or contribute into the digital ventures program that we drive within Mars Enterprise Architecture team, and in partnership with our segments as well. So maybe all of this sounds, yes, this is possible, but can this be done, right? That's probably the question that most of you might have. But I just put 3 examples here that are out there, which probably connects everything that I've said in the previous slide: being purposeful, being fast time to the market, test and learn mindset, etc. So the first problem that we looked at is about when pandemic happened. Obviously, we were not sure if the retailers were open or shut. Can our sales teams meet them and sell our products, and how do we kind of collaborate with them? So in some of our developing markets, we launched a WhatsApp ordering solution that was up and running in a few weeks' time, and our retailers could check the stocks for Mars products and actually could order from their phone without requiring any training, enablement, additional infrastructure, etc. So that's a very meaningful win, because obviously we were providing Mars products to our customers and then to the consumers who need them on time, but at the same time we were doing what was required in that point in time as well, right? Like trying to maintain safety of our associates and customers and so on. The second one, which was probably had a lot of coverage in the press, in TV, internet, etc., was about how did we digitize Halloween. So this is probably the example that's very close to my heart, because things like this, which is how do you convert an opportunity that has a touch point via digital to kind of add value, because Halloween was literally not possible. I'm talking about last year when social distancing and lockdown restrictions were in place, and it was basically without the traditional trick or treat, Halloween is not Halloween. So we came up with a team, an idea to say, let's build a treat town app wherein you could actually set up yourselves if you're open to be trick or treated. So you could set up your house address, nominate your candy points bowl, and add real points into it. And if you could sign up on the other side, you could sign up your kids to kind of go trick or treating, develop their avatars, go trick or treat, and pick up real points from the bowl, from the candy bowl, that you could actually go redeem with the Walmarts and Targets, the customers that we work with today. So we had to not only just develop an app to digitize this experience, but we had to also look at how do we create this gamification experience. It's in a secure environment. How do we connect the supply chain ecosystem to do the redemption of these points through our customers, and make sure that our seasonal products are there in those stores, that when our customers or consumers go and exchange these points for, they have what they're looking for. So that's a fantastic, I would say, experience of innovation of how can you create a physical moment into digital when it was very much required. The third one, obviously very emotional as well, because a lot of appointments were getting cancelled at one point. So we have VCA, Banfield, and a number of other hospitals within our organization, and a lot of pet parents wanted to meet their vets and consult with them of what's happening with my dog or cat, etc. So here, until that point, we did not have a telemedicine vet appointments or virtual vet appointment solution. So we enabled quickly using Teams APIs connectivity to the external world, and we were able to turn this virtual appointment on pretty quickly, which could help relax the pet parents with the anxieties that they had about their pets. Obviously, the goal for our pet segment is to create a better world for pets, which was, and this innovation was very meaningful in that particular way. So 3 key examples. Obviously, we do many more at March, but I just wanted to share a few things that make it look um, connect with our audience today, and make sure that I communicate my content with real value today, so I can bring it to life. So with the last slide, I wanted to close out my session today. So it's about the innovation or the transformation that happens, right? We always relate back to the butterfly story of when you look at how a butterfly is born, when it goes through the various metamorphosis stages in its life, the larva, the pupa, the cocoon, and then when it becomes a butterfly. So we could actually look at this famous quote here to say there's nothing in a caterpillar that it tells you that it's going to be a butterfly. The most difficult part is in the middle, when it hangs upside down, doesn't eat food for multiple weeks, sheds its own skin, and tries to bring itself out of that particular hard shell. So that's how innovation happens, and then the result is here for everyone to see. So it will feel difficult. It will feel like, oh, it's not going to happen, or it's too challenging, or we should give up. But the teams that win are always the ones who never give up and then keep going. Learn, fail fast, iterate, and build the momentum to keep going. So with that said, I would like to end my presentation and maybe hand this back to Jose. Thank you.
That's fantastic. What a great presentation, Sathish, on the journey of transformation and innovation, value creation that you're leading at Mars, and the entire organization is engaging on. So, number of different comments and the themes that have emerged. Let me ask you some basic things that came up. How are you defining innovation at the organization? When people come up to you and say, "Okay, what is innovation?" How you're defining that for the organization?
So first off, there is a time constraint that we put to say, can we do something in a short frame of time? That's one dimension that we look at. The second is it creating a digital aha moment in that process, right? Is there a touch point that never existed through digital before in that particular situation? And is it adding that aha moment which actually drives either a consumer engagement or value for the enterprise or efficiency? And you could have other measures there. So there's a time measure, and then there is a digital moment measure that we put. And the third is looking at this as probably something as a layer on top, right? And I generally refer to this as the cherry on the cake. So innovation happens because it's not like creating the whole tower, but then adding that cherry that makes the cake look much better than it was in the past. So this is about trying to come up with a mindset of adding that delta on something that already exists and making it more valuable for that particular end user, whether it's a customer or a supplier or an employee. So in summary, 3 dimensions. Time, can we do it fast? Second is your experience dimension. Is it adding an aha moment digitally that didn't exist in the past? And the third one is this that delta that you can bring in and layer it on top of your already existing cake that makes it look much better? And that in a nutshell is what innovation is. It's relevant that you do it at a point in time, because maybe there are lots of articles online if you look at it, but sometimes we run ahead of the market when the innovation is not ready. So today we assume that internet is a commodity, it exists everywhere. So building solutions that rely on internet, 4G and sometimes 5G is okay to do it today, but if you're doing it 15 years ago, it probably wouldn't fly. So I think making it relevant to that situation is a fundamental driver here. So the risk of the innovation that decides whether it's successful or failure. So the timing of it, right? So where we decide this is the perfect time to launch it, and that's the key, to know when to launch it. But we always keep trying, because you never know what works and what things change. But when the timing is right, it really looks much beautiful.
Very good. Yeah, there's an old saying that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose timing has come, and the time, everything related to time of ideas, from the timing overall to the implementation time, are very important components. So, and you emphasize that. Now, another question that came up is that Mars is a huge organization. I mean, you have 125,000 associates. So innovation can come from all sorts of places. You can come from the very top. Maybe some leaders are enlightened and have a vision of innovation. It can come up from middle levels. It can come up from anywhere in the organization where people may have ideas on how to improve and innovate the way they work and serve their clients. So the question is, what type of system do you have to capture ideas, and then how does that system prioritize where you're going to work on?
So right now, obviously we have an innovation or digital ventures tracker that we have internally, wherein we track all our digital ventures, as we call it, or innovation items that we drive across the board. So that's obviously we track it, where it is, what value is it driving? Is it giving us quality growth or building customer loyalty? So there are a few dimensions that or KPIs that we look to measure the success of that particular digital venture. But that's basically, I would say, the aspect of tracking, measuring, just like you could measure any other normal project. But that's not where the challenge is. The challenge is driving innovation on the front line, right? So the way we do it is obviously we have to equip ourselves with the knowledge about what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the technology trend side of the industry trend side of the industry. So what's happening in the world of CPG as a result, what's happening in the world of healthcare, what's happening in the world of retail. So these are our kind of zoom in areas for us to learn more about, and we learn through our partner network, our peer network, etc. So continuous learning agenda is on one side, and the other side we run hackathon sessions, right? We run hackathons wherein we approach a particular function and with the business segment leaders, obviously, and we do some working sessions with them to say, okay, what can't you solve today, and where would you think is the best area for us to focus on. So we develop these partnerships, run hackathons with them, and try and build on the hackathon momentum to say, okay, we discovered these problems in the hackathon. These are the potential solutions or prototypes, and we start building. We sometimes bring solutions to the table through our network of enterprise architecture, or sometimes we build through our internal teams iteratively to solve for that problem. So the second focus area is obviously the hackathon approach of how we partner with the business leaders, make them part of this journey, inspire them, provoke them, and how do we kind of act on identifying these innovation areas and be ready with ideas to present ourselves as well. And third one is when we start the momentum, what happens is you communicate, right? You say, this particular market in Malaysia implemented this fantastic solution and we saw 300% ROI, blah, blah, blah. And someone else from the other side of the business says, hey, I have the same problem, or I have a different idea that potentially can build on this problem. So then collaboration starts, because once you start publishing saying that this team is doing this or that team is doing that, then you kind of gamify between them and create a competition and make an environment so that people can willingly come in and contribute ideas. We get different types of input. Sometimes we get ideas, sometimes we get problems, sometimes we get solutions, and sometimes we get challenge. So we get everything, but the idea is create that momentum by gamifying this across the organization and create a forum wherein people can come in and contribute. They need to feel comfortable that, hey, this is happening, so I know where to go and pitch my idea. If people are not going to, and they will not be shy, and create some sort of a mechanism wherein if you create like a dragon's den or a shark tank, right? So wherein you present ideas and leaders can invest on your idea and build on it and execute. So that's the third dimension that I would like to look at, wherein we've been creating that momentum, and using that momentum we've created forums for people to come in and contribute and build on the ideas that are already successful to move it to a different part of the business or come up with brand new ideas that need support of execution.
And that's a perfect segue to the other theme that has come up, which is in the journey of innovation. Ideas are very important for sure, but at the same time, they are everywhere. And what are uncommon in organizations are people willing to put their reputation behind ideas. And basically, innovation execution leaders, because the execution of innovation is where it's at, and in terms of challenge, and then the leadership for that innovation execution is very important. So the question is, how do you identify or develop leaders for innovation execution?
So this is not a separate team. So obviously each one of us in enterprise architecture have a portfolio to work on. So somebody specializes in consumer facing innovation, somebody specializes in factory facing innovation, and so on. So the beauty here is that innovation team is not a separate team. This is happening over and above because you need context to innovate, right? So it's very dangerous for organizations to have an incubation center who are disconnected from the regular conversation, because that's where the touch points happen. So if I'm talking to a business leader who's having problem with excess inventory, I need to bring my innovation opportunity into that conversation and say, okay, let's talk about have you tried this, or have you seen this, that we did in other markets, etc. So thankfully, because of our role of architecture governance, we are already looking at different things that are going on in the enterprise, and we are using, like when I said, build teams that can multi-purpose or wear multiple hats. This is what I meant when we have existing enterprise architects who wear those innovation hats as well. So every single one of us in the team has at least a few digital ventures against our roles to go and drive, but we have kind of focus areas of how do we drive that. So to answer your question, Jose, it's not a separate team. It is over. It's done within the same team. Now the execution also needs some bandwidth, some support. Obviously, it needs some oversight, but you need a network, right? You need a solution delivery partner. You need a mechanism like a Scrum to kind of iteratively develop the product, etc. So we partner with various delivery teams inside the organization. So we have defined a way to actually say, okay, the templatized is probably the word you can use, wherein if there is a problem and we know how to run the innovation agenda to drive execution part of the innovation. So it's pretty set so that it's first few occasions, if it was a buy scenario, we had to adapt. If it's a build scenario, we had to adapt, etc. But fortunately, doing this for about 2.5 years now, we've kind of built that repeating templatized delivery engine to say, if there's a digital venture, how do we create that 12-week MVP mindset? What are the checklists we need to have delivered? How can we check this architecture is good and the solution is adding value, and then drive from there? So we're kind of doing that value. So I think it's a great question, because often what happens is most of us, right, we visit conferences, we see all the beautiful things in this world, but sometimes do not take that extra step of coming back into the organization and challenging people to say, I think this can add value here. And the more relevant you are to the problem, the people will listen to you. And obviously, there are things that like subject matter expertise, technology, empowerment, and all of that stuff. But a lot of times what happens is technologists go see a lot of good things outside, but don't try and bring it or get that attention or traction internally as well. So what we haven't done is created a separate team to execute. So we have a digital venture tracker that we track with our obviously the CIOs of the segments to say this is what we're driving for the segments actively. And we look at the prioritization based on sponsorship, based on the market opportunity or a threat, and make sure that it sits inside enterprise architecture and is driven by the architects who are there on the ground every day, who understand the problems of delivering such innovations and the hardships that come with it as well. So we want to make sure it's successful. So hope this answers your question.
No, that's excellent. I mean, you're talking about very important innovation execution skills, collaborative leadership skills that these leaders who must be connected to the business and understand how it creates value to the business and to the customer. They must be a critical part of that. So Sathish, thank you so much. We're out of time here, but it's always a masterclass on culture, business, and digital transformation when we meet you. We're very grateful for your generosity in sharing your skills and expertise with our global audience today.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for having me, and hope the content was useful to all the attendees today. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
very much so. Useful content, practical content from true industries leaders who are doing it, not talking about it, they're doing it. And you are one of them, Sathish. That's Sathish Kamath with Mars, directly from the offices in London today, here, sharing his expertise at Enterprise Architecture Europe. We're going to be taking a break now, and we are going to come back at the top of the hour with our final session for today. And we're going to bring you a lead enterprise architect in the biochemistry, biopharmaceutical industry, I should say, senior data scientist Nilesh Ajmani with Biogen, who is going to talk to us about the journey of enterprise architecture from his perspective. So we'll take a break now. I'll see you back at the top of the hour.